When you think of Delphine Software with their adventure games, you generally think of games such as Flashback and its sequel Fade to Black, as well as Another World. Flashback and Another World were very ambitious games for their animation quality at the time, with Flashback even holding the Guinness World Record as the best-selling French game of all time at one point. On the other hand, Delphine were also the developers behind Shaq Fu. The developer also worked on some point-and-click adventure games, with their first foray into it being Future Wars in 1989. However, today's review will be looking at their second point-and-click adventure game, and it's one with an interesting history behind it. Today we'll be looking at 007 James Bond, the stealth affair, otherwise known as Operation Stealth in Europe. For this review I looked at 3 versions of the game. I played 007 James Bond, the stealth affair on a real Commodore Amiga 500. I also completed Operation Stealth on the Evercade VS console through the Delphine Software Collection 1, and a cracked version of Operation Stealth through emulation on WinUAE.
Hello, Officer. My name is Blaine. John Blaine.
Now, you're probably wondering why this game had the James Bond name added to it for its North American release. The reason for this is that Interplay Productions, the game's publisher for North America, had thought that adding a more recognisable spy would help with the game's sales, and who else would turn heads than James Bond? Besides, this isn't Bond's first rodeo in having games changed to include him in it. Live and Let Die for home computers originally started as a game called Aqua Blast before its publisher Domark thought that the boat driving gameplay of the game was similar to the boat chase scene of Live and Let Die. Back on topic, 007 James Bond the Stealth Affair, which I'll shorten to the Stealth Affair going forward, also made some changes to the game which I'll discuss further in this video. In this game you play either James Bond in the North American release or John Glames in Operation Stealth. Regardless, you are summoned by the CIA, which is very unusual for Bond, to aid in the recovery of the Stealth, a fighter jet capable of being completely undetectable by current technology. The Stealth had been stolen from the Marine Corps Air Base in Miramar and was last seen in the fictional Latin American banana republic of Santa Paragua. With the Stealth being stolen on US soil, speculations are on it possibly being the Soviets, but nonetheless, Bond/Glames flies out to investigate. A couple of minor details here of the game's dialogue. In the Stealth Affair, the CIA director will confirm that they had requested assistance from England and Bond is on loan from MI5 as opposed to MI6. Bond will also be given a briefcase with some gadgets left for him by Q. In Operation Stealth, the director will ask Glames how his holiday has been since he's an agent for the CIA, and the briefcase had been left for him by a person by the name of Charlie. Bond/Glames arrives at Santa Paragua Airport, which is where your adventure begins. The game is a point-and-click adventure game similar to the old Sierra and LucasArts point-and-click adventure games, though this game doesn't require you to type commands, instead selecting commands and where or what to use them on. But is this game any good? Find out in The Good. Visually, this game looks gorgeous for a point-and-click adventure from 1990. If there's one thing Delphine doesn't disappoint with, it's generally been their visuals. The opening scenes, which features the Stealth being stolen, is animated really well, and the game's music really complements it too. While the game got an Atari ST and MS-DOS release, the game's music of those releases pale in comparison with the Commodore Amiga version, which I consider the definitive way to play the game, though the MS-DOS version does have the advantage with a bigger colour palette. The game has several locations that you'll visit, ranging from Santa Paragua to underwater caverns and even an undersea base, and they look great. Locations aside, even visuals of items that you get over the course of the game and things that you interact with look good too. This might be their second point-and-click adventure after Future Wars, but Delphine certainly know how to make it look and animate nicely. The game's story I felt was pretty typical of a Bond plot, so I can certainly understand why the James Bond name was attached to the game in North America. The game has everything from enemy agents, a femme fatale, a global criminal organisation, and a plot to attack major cities around the world with the Stealth unless demands aren't met. The Stealth Affair also makes numerous corrections to Operation Stealth's spelling and naming of things, and even adds additional dialogue, so it makes sense as to why Bond is on this mission, as well as having the enemies address him as Bond. So I appreciate the fact that they went the extra mile in order to make these changes and corrections. The game also employed a form of anti-piracy by having you refer to an image that came with the game and to identify the colours of the image. This type of anti-piracy, alongside referring to the manual and code wheels, were common for the time, However, when this game's anti-piracy was cracked, there was a version of Operation Stealth for the Commodore Amiga which, if you had the 1MB RAM expansion or more, would have the Amiga narrate the game using the voice from Workbench's Say utility.
You gave some money to the florist.
You're paid up, center. Choose one.
No movements, MR Glames. Give me that briefcase. But the assassination. I hope you like that little trick.
However, this function came with a flaw. If you had clicked the mouse button to skip through the speech faster than the game, it would cause the game to lock up and you would have to reboot the Amiga. Overall though, the plot was a pretty standard affair and it was enjoyable. However, the game isn't entirely good, so let's discuss what I didn't like in the bad. The game has several dead ends which can work against you if you don't know what to look out for. Some can happen right at the very start of the game and can screw you over later on in the game, such as not taking out the pen from the briefcase as you'll need to use it late in the game, and you'll lose access to that briefcase early on. In another part of the game, there'll be a situation where you'll go into a hotel, get ambushed, and then thrown into the bottom of the sea with a rock tied to you. Unless you had stopped to buy a bracelet from a man on the beach outside the hotel using coins that you had to exchange money for at a bank near the start of the game, it would have been a dead end for you. It also doesn't help that you need to exchange money at the bank twice to get 2 lots of coins, since you'll need to use one of them to get a flower for an exchange of information. Even the game's ending is a dead end if you failed to get 2 key items before a certain point. One of the items is an elastic band that the game gives you absolutely no indication that it exists or that you will need it. The elastic band can only be found on the ocean floor when trying to infiltrate the enemy base, and depending on the version of the game, I found the elastic band can be in different places on the ocean floor. On top of that, you will need to search for it while trying to avoid being eaten by sharks, which can be rough given how abysmal controlling Bond/Glames underwater is, and the collision detection of the large sharks, which are the ones that can kill you. The other item is an inflatable raft, and unless you examined every single thing in every room, you would probably miss it. Without both of these items, you will not be able to complete the game as they are both crucial for the end sequence. There are also moments where you have a short window of opportunity to use the items to save yourself, so you also need to be prepared on when and where to use them. If you're playing through the Amiga version on original hardware, the game requires a separate disk in order to save, so if you're doing it properly, you'll be constantly swapping floppy disks in order to load and save the game. Thankfully, since the Amiga was a huge part of my childhood, I have the patience for this, but I can't say the same for anyone who isn't familiar with it. However, the Evercade version does allow saving at any time, similar to save states, though this will tie into my next issue. The game has several minigames to break up the point-and-click elements of it, and I found the controls during these minigames to be incredibly clunky and the detection quite poor. Early in the game, you'll have to escape and swim your way back into town. With Bond/Glames having a limited amount of air when they swim, trying to get to each air pocket can be a chore with just how clunky the game registers where you click to move. There is also a section where you need to catch up to an enemy on a jet ski and then avoid enemies on said jet ski, and the random nature of the enemies and how quickly hazards appear can be a bit of a nuisance, but it's passable. The game also features a couple of stealth sections where Bond/Glames have to navigate a maze to avoid guards, and later in the game rats, which for some reason look like giant insect things in the game over screen, in order to find a key and progress to the next level. Throughout these mazes there are rotating doors which, if used strategically, can trap guards and rats, allowing you to catch a breath and plan your next move. However, the collision detection of the enemies and the doors can be frustrating, as sometimes the guards or rats will just simply go through the door and get you. It also doesn't help that when you're navigating the maze with the rats, you'll only have a little spotlight guiding you through it. Thankfully, you'll have a general idea of where the rats are due to their eyes, but when they aren't visible in the spotlight, they can go through the doors if you've trapped them, so it defeats the purpose. Those maps are also significantly more complex, and you'll find that you can be trapped between 2 rats and have no choice but to be captured. And it's either reload from your last save, and if you screwed yourself over by saving when trapped, it'd start a new game, so make backups. This is also where a key difference between the Stealth Affair and Operation Stealth comes in. The Stealth Affair only has Bond navigating through 2 sets of mazes to avoid the guards and rats during their respective sessions, so these sections are significantly less frustrating. Operation Stealth has 4 of each, and one of the later ones with the rats There is an issue where one rat is just patrolling an area you need to pass to leave. You have to go to the bottom of the screen and turn the corner, but it's not possible since the rat will immediately turn once it reaches the corner and move back up. You can't wait for the rat to pass you as it won't since you're at a location where it will immediately turn around. I only managed to pass it by reloading to an earlier point during that maze and hoped that that rat wouldn't get stuck patrolling that corridor. Thankfully, this particular map was removed from the stealth affair. Other than that, I have nothing else to complain about, so let's wrap things up with the opinion. The Stealth Affair / Operation Stealth, despite my complaints, was still a pretty fun game to play through. I did like the plot of the game, and the game is visually appealing, with the Amiga version having the best music of all the versions I looked at, though the Evercade version is based on the Amiga. I really appreciate how the North American release as The Stealth Affair did go to the lengths to change the game's dialogue to match Bond being the main character, as well as making the maze minigames easier by cutting them in half. However, the minigames in general were pretty rough, and the game was really good at locking you into dead ends unless you did some very specific things, or find some very specific items which the game provides no clue or indication that you need. Bond as a point-and-click adventure, even though this is technically not a Bond game, is a pretty cool idea, and I think Delphine could have made a series involving John Glames. I would have certainly liked to have played another game. With some polish, I think it would have turned into an interesting series. Though in saying that, I should play their third point-and-click adventure, Cruise for a Corpse. If you're curious about James Bond games, even if this game is technically not one in Europe, or point-and-click adventures, then it's worth taking a look at. Just be prepared to see a lot of game overs as you persevere. So with that, it's time for my rating. Oh well, here's a treat for everyone.
I would give 007 James Bond the Stealth Affair, otherwise known as Operation Stealth, the Stealth out of 10. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next Infinite Backlog review.
If you enjoyed today's review, feel free to like, comment and subscribe for more. You can check out our other videos or follow us on X, Instagram and Facebook. Once again, thank you for watching.